Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show, where I interview educators and entrepreneurs on leveling up. Each episode, I zoom in someone who's dope, and we just sit back and have a conversation on what it means to live your best life. Now, if this is your first time checking out the podcast, this is the Mobile University for Entrepreneurs, and I'm your host, Dr. Will. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast, you know I'm all about educators taking control over their lives, their careers, and their finances. And I wanted to do this sort of three-part series with different experts to come on and talk about different ways we are impacted or influenced in terms of our money decisions and how do we view money, our spending habits or investing, etc. And the first guest today is a therapist who's all about that money. And I wanted to have her on because I to jumpstart this, because I figured this would be very fitting because so much of how we view money and our spending habits or what we don't buy or what we do is all impacted. Of course, financial literacy plays a part, but it's all about emotion, right? How many times have you heard of a basketball player that you know made $150 million and then they're back in the hood because all of it's gone? Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to jumpstart this series so that we can sort of, get that understanding so that we can actually get our financial houses in order. So today's guest is Christian LaShanae. Again, she is a licensed therapist. I have all of these questions I want to throw at her about what we talked about how your emotions influence your money mindset. So for those who'll be listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Simplecast, Stitcher, and Spotify, will you please introduce yourself, Christian?
Thank you so much, Dr. Will. My name is, I'm Christian Howard, and I am a licensed professional counselor here in the Washington, D.C. area. I also go by a psychotherapist. It's the same kind of interchangeable. I have been serving the underserved community for the past 14 years, from California to Atlanta to now Washington, D.C. I'm originally from San Bernardino, California, where there was a lot of gang violence, a lot of oppressed communities. And so I wanted to get into counseling to further understand behaviors and kind of why we do what we do. I am all for everyone, but I will be honest, my work is specifically in the Black agenda, changing like the Black communities, minority, underserved, marginalized communities.
Awesome. So I'm always curious as to how people got to where they are. You just mentioned sort of the initial inspiration for how you became a licensed counselor. So I'm going to skip that and ask you, what has it been like doing that type of work?
It's been very rewarding. Definitely, I feel like it's a parallel process where I'm healing myself as well as healing others. It's been eye-opening. I think that I've learned a lot, especially because I'll just be honest. I myself is kind of like, I like to kind of coin myself as like the hood therapist because I myself come from the hood. My family is, I always tell my folks, I tell my folks that I had the best of both worlds. My mother was more so like upper middle class family, Black family, and then my dad was a gang member. So I was able to get both sides, and in doing so, I just really like working with my underserved population. I truly understand. I feel like I walked their walk, and so for me to make it out and transform, I look forward to transforming other lives and communities.
So I don't think people normally put together sort of how their familiar bonds or relationships in the community or where they come from, how that sort of impacts how they think about money. as a psychotherapist, how did you put together the connection between sort of our emotional experiences, our bonds, and personal finance?
Simple, because if you think about the book As a Man Thinketh, so he is, right? And so our thoughts play into our behaviors. Everything kind of goes together. I think that we've been socialized to think that we should operate in silos, especially when it comes to like the medical field. A lot of people didn't talk about mental health, but the brain is one of the biggest muscles that impacts everything. It sends signals to everything, like everything is connected, right? And so when I think about if everything is connected in our bodies, and then we think about the system that we're so much talking about right now when it comes to like institutionalized racism and like, you know, the systemic issues of oppression and things like that, well, then we have to think about capitalism. And how do you really survive in the world? Capitalism. Money is everything. When we talk about money, we say risk and rewards. And so if you think about that, that takes a lot of emotions and decision making. And so in order to make those proper decisions, you have to have like your mental health in order so that you can make those right decisions. I mean, mental health is categorized as anything that's impacting your daily functioning. And so I look at that as everything. Mental health is the center of everything we do.
Mm. So let's get into maybe some specifics or examples of how does someone's upbringing or familiar relationships influence their money story?
Gotcha. Okay, so I like to give examples, and I'm really transparent about my life. So I would say this, like if we always talk about mentors and modeling, being examples for our community. Well, if you grew up and you only saw that, like your parent was on welfare or only went into a certain career, you're gonna do what you're exposed to. And so that's just kind of like behavior, right? Like you're gonna do what you constantly see, what you constantly look at. And so I think when it comes to like finances, if you didn't grow up in a family that talked about finances, that did investing or taught you about credit and things like that, then you're not going to know, and your behaviors and habits are going to mimic kind of what you grew up with. And that goes back to like the generational curses that we talk about, the post-traumatic slave syndrome, you know, that we've had a lot of research on. We are always going to do what we kind of been exposed to. And then some stuff is just like innate, it transferred, it's inherited, you know, habits are inherited. We have to break those habits. And we can see this from when we're talking about racism or talking about like molestation in communities or trauma in communities, then I think we should be kind of mindful and be able to talk about like finances and how it relates to our behaviors and habits.
So how do you get to start talking to people about that, right? So when you hear that, like I work in education,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that when you are working with students from a certain social economic background, when what people don't talk about a lot of times, we'll talk about the test scores and the reading and the writing and all that stuff. But what doesn't get talked about a lot is how do you get kids to look at their environment where they currently are? And when you're trying to sort of get them to understand, well, the purpose of education is for you to sort of be able to make decisions and have better options in your life, no matter what route you take, but you just want to have more options available. But that also means not doing what you are seeing around you. And I don't even know how to have that conversation sometimes with students. If you're saying, look, I know, your mama or somebody else may be doing this, but you can't do that if this is where you say you want to be. Because it's almost, I don't want to say it's turning your back on these people, but you cannot think the way they are thinking. You cannot live the way they have lived. You cannot view the world the way they are, and you cannot allow sort of how they are or what they may say to you influence you to the point to where you don't get out.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about money in that way, and again, you're looking at people, how do people sort of begin that process of moving forward and moving beyond what they have been taught and what they have seen?
Exposure. I mean, if I can keep it so simple, I would say exposure. And I think that's where we talk about privilege, capitalism, poverty, and the barriers and challenges to that. So I really do think that you have to get, I'll say this, therapists, therapy is all I can say for all communities. When you go to a therapist, our first instinct, session is gathering information. And when we gather that information, we're gathering information about your biological, sociological, psychological, and your sociological. And that also means your environment, right? And so your environment plays a big piece on your life. And like we always say, they're products of their environment. I am really big on like exposure. I think that we have to take people out of their comfort zones and their environments that they're familiar with in order for them to change. So we think about I work in the community where I work with the homeless population, and we put them in like transitional housing programs or group homes and things like that. And even jail, people say like, we're rehabilitating them. But if you're taking them back to their same environment with no new resources, how do you really expect for somebody to change? So I'm always big on like, you have to get out of that environment, get exposed to something else, mentorships, being exposed to like, I even think that we should, the Black community moving forward, I think that we should stop kind of praising entertainers and start praising like individuals who have great careers, like a lawyer, a doctor, a professor, and showing that you can still have that same lifestyle. Because if we really think about it, our minds are literally brainwashed with social media, entertainment, and we follow everything that they do. So like right now you had T.I. come out and say individuals who were getting like government money during the pandemic, they should spend it on property and assets versus liabilities like bags and Cartier watches and things like that. Well, our community was taught to only kind of like show your worth by wearing it. We weren't taught that like, hey, you should actually invest it and you don't necessarily have to wear it out. You can have money in the bank or investments account and properties and you can still be rich, but you don't necessarily have to wear it. You can still shop at Walmart and still be a rich individual. And I think that other communities, they do it and we laugh at them, but the Black community, we just exploit ourselves. But I mean, it goes back to like racism, oppression, marginalizing us. And like, this was all a part of the plan with entertainment and everything else. So when I'm working with clients, I'm quick to say like, what are your challenges and are your barriers? I believe poverty is a clinical issue. Actually, it's a public health emergency. But it also is in the DSM-5 in the back in the V codes. It shows that poverty is a barrier and can impact your daily functioning. And so I just think we have to start thinking about things differently and taking it more serious in order to see some change.
But how does someone approach their families in the healing process, right? So I was watching this video of this South Asian woman, and in the video talking about her sort of money journey, she of course talked about colorism because she's one of the darker ones who I had to look at her like 5 times before I was like, you ain't Black. But she talked about how her parents were like, money is bad because she came from a very religious household, right? So like money was bad, but then they also lived check to check, and how her parents messed up her credit because they were putting stuff in her name, right, as a child. And she, in sort of getting her self together, she said she had to get to a point to where she could say, I forgive my parents because they didn't know any better. How does someone have that conversation, with their family to heal themselves so that they are okay with the fact that maybe they didn't learn what they should have learned financially, or maybe again, you're 18, you go off to college and you try to get an apartment and you can't because on your credit file it shows that you have something defaulted and I didn't sign for this because maybe a parent put something in your name and they didn't pay for it. How do those conversations in the family begin to happen?
I'm going to say go to therapy and allow the counselor to provide to facilitate that conversation. But a simple exercise that you can always use is do a genogram. And in a genogram, you're writing down like historically what has happened in your family chronologically. So like your great grandparents, your grandparents, and then your children and everything else. And in that you can always do like health issues, you can do like behaviors, financial habits. And then you can see that this information was passed down to your family. So a lot of times if your parent used your name on your credit or, kind of hindered you from moving forward financially, it's because their parents didn't know any better. And that's what they taught them. Or maybe in that it was a broken home or there was a lack of structure, lack of knowledge somewhere. And so I just think that like information, knowledge is key. Understanding that and providing some grace to yourself and to your family is key. And it's a process. It's not going to happen right away. I mean, building your credit is a process. So especially if it was bad, or even if you had no credit, it's a process. It takes time. It's all about like having, history, years of credit history. So I would just say like, it's a process, but you also have to be able to present options to people and show them that like, hey, I'm just like you. We came from the same place. You can make it out. Because a lot of people, they don't hear the struggle. They only see the glitz and glamour. And so it is hard for somebody to visualize themselves in a different situation if this is all they know. Like I tell people when I first started learning about trading in the stock market, I've been trading for the past like 10, 11 years. And it took somebody that I met when I was working at not a fast food restaurant, at a restaurant. I was working at Ruby Tuesdays as a waitress my senior year in undergrad. And I met a guy he used to come in and get salads all the time. And he was just like, I want to teach you and show you about real estate and I invest. And it took him actually showing me his E-Trade account that had 2 million in there. And he's just like, this is my play money. And I'm like, I had to pause and say like, well, I've never seen this before. So show me how you did it. But if you teach people how to fish and not just give them the fish, then, we will be better off. So I really think it's just about like showing them. I always ask people like, show me what you did. I want to see you do it first. Then I will get on and do it as well. But I think you just have to, those examples, lead by example.
I hear you.
Really quick, with church folks though, like when we talk about religion, that's a whole different topic, right? Because that's in the whole ideology that you have to change. And I will say if you're gonna get a lot of pushback, so just but resistance is a part of the process too. So when family members resist and everybody might be very skeptical about what you're saying, that's a part of the process. And we just have to get comfortable and sit in that and know that continue to lead by example. This is a financially stable life is kind of, for the Black community, is a courageous life. Because it is a lot of risk in that if you want a big reward, you have to take big risk. So it is all about like having confidence and self-esteem and knowing that maybe one day your family, you might have to turn your back on your family to get to where you need to be.
Spiritually, I'm just not where I need to be to have certain conversations with certain people. Because for me, like when you talk about certain celebrities, now I don't follow everybody because I don't like a lot of noise, but when I look at someone, like an Oprah, or like a LeBron or some of the other NBA cats, these people are financially living certain lives that I go, now, I know you kids out there, like, y'all need to be seeing, like, I know y'all seeing that LeBron own all these businesses, that he's doing all of this stuff, and then he talks about it. It's not like he hides and doesn't tell people that he's making these money moves. Like, he's out here doing it. And even with you know, Jay-Z, how he always talks about ownership, and he has created businesses. And even Tyler Perry just hit the $1 billion club because he owns his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, now I'm not a therapist. I wanted to be one, but I know that I don't have the temperament to be one, because I can't just sit there, because I understand that there is a process. And I'm not that type of a process person to kind of just sit there with people. I'm more so of, you see this right here? This is crazy. You need to stop that. And I know that's not therapy, but but when I see like sort of the things that are going on, so even when I talk to, you know, kids, and someone to say, look, you see these J's, and I'm be, you know, driving this ride with the 22s and be doing all this. I'm like, that's not real money. What do you mean that's not real money, brother?
Right. No
That's
value.
like, that's what? Like, I and I know I'm different. I'm 46. And even it took me a certain while to understand money and certain things in a different way. But I think like the information is out there. I don't know how some people get it and they're like, oh, I'm inspired. And some people see it, but it doesn't impact them to change, right? So I'm just not there spiritually to have certain conversations with certain people, because it upsets me when someone dies and you see a GoFundMe for a funeral. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
life insurance, people. I really don't understand. Like, I'm serious. I really don't understand why this is still happening in 2020.
Well, I would say this, like, I definitely think that information is out there, but we have to be mindful that, like I always say, our smartphones is only as smart as the person who is like using it. Because yes, it's out there, but like you have to be willing to follow the right people. So like, yes, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, all of that, but the people that I follow are people that are gonna pour into me. So yes, I'm following those who are investing. I'm following those who talk about therapy, or who are in the public health arena, because I want to continue to learn and pour into myself. But if we don't value ourselves, which is a lot of us have some confidence and self-esteem issues, then we don't know what to pour into us. So a lot of us are pouring into these kind of surface things. And so I will be honest, I think that entertainment has literally poisoned us, because a lot of our people are pouring into themselves fake bodies and like being half naked, or, and I'm not judging anyone, so let me just say that, but we're pouring into we're pouring into like those rappers who like the Futures, to be, you know, to just like lack of better words, like Future, who has multiple women who have babies by him and he hasn't married not one, or, you know, like there's all of these things that we pour into ourselves. And so it's all about like, what are you willing to follow? And then what conversations you're willing to have. I am really big on, if you call my phone and you're talking about gossip or anything else, like you're draining my energy. And so I have strict boundaries on what I allow in my space. And I think that that comes with building your confidence and self-esteem and knowing what you want to put in. Like you have to know yourself in order to like live a healthier lifestyle. So like, I think it's not just about financial literacy, it's about like just having a healthier lifestyle in general. Whether like whatever it is, like there's so much information out there, and it can either brainwash us or help heal us and propel us to be even better.
Mm.
But a
All
lot
right.
of people, but you said something too, really quick. You said about like change. So we have to be honest that there are stages to change. And some people are stuck in that first stage and they might be stuck for a long time. So yes, life insurance is out there, but then we got to think about like, what about those companies who came into Black neighborhoods and said they were life insurance companies and they were like these small companies who went out of business and then you never heard back from them. I feel like that happens a lot in the community. So you got to think about like the trauma that we had to deal with, which trauma plays a lot into our decision making and how we can kind of change behavior, because sometimes we repeat our traumatic patterns like subconsciously. We continue to do them because like our body, our system, our nervous system responds to it. So like now the neurotransmitters are responding to these things. So therapy is really big on like neuroplasticity and understanding you have to have new psychological experiences in order to change your behavior.
It, it angers me because I love Black people. And if we have not recognized this by now, because Malcolm told us then and other folks, we are on our own here.
Mm.
We should definitely be voting. We should definitely play, some of us should definitely be trying to work at Facebook and other companies to try to affect change on that level, because I believe we need to be all in terms of solutions.
Yes.
But we also need to be building our own schools, and we need to be building Black banks, supporting Black banks. We need to be building Black businesses. We need to be building, Black communities. So when someone says we don't want Black people living here, I don't care. I don't want to live around you either if you don't want to live around me. So, we should be creating those safe communities for ourselves. And the fact that we have not gotten to that point of understanding that self-reliance and self-determination is the only way we will have liberation, it angers me, because I'm like, dude, you do realize that until we start to do for ourselves, we are not going to see the shift. Like, you'll see incremental change, but you won't see the groundbreaking shift until we ourselves do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, I just can't even fathom why we have not, as a collective, after seeing what we've seen, have not said enough is enough.
You want to know something? I would say this. It took me going to South Africa to truly understand everything. If you go to South Africa and you go to Nelson Mandela's museum, as soon as you walk in, you can decide if you want to go through the black gates or the white gate. So the white gate is like for white people, and the black one is for Black people. So I went through the black gate, and when you go in, on the wall, there's a whole bunch of writing on the gates, and there's one that stated, and I'm not saying it verbatim, but for lack of better words, she would just say, it stated that we have designed this system to make sure that you never get out, that you're always going to be oppressed. And so when I think about that, and you say like we have to be self-reliant, right? Self-sufficient in order for us to like be liberated. Well, we don't even have self-esteem and self-confidence and like know thyself. Then how could we? I think that the Black community has been plagued by so much trauma that we have to truly heal. And healing that trauma is going to take a lot, because when you're healing yourself, that doesn't mean you're not triggered. You're still triggered by something, and when you're triggered, that your natural response is to kind of go back to those familiar behaviors. So it really takes a conscious person to change. I'll be honest with you. And when I say about change and speaking with that, because I myself was like, I was a hood chick, I'm being honest. Like my first fiance was a gang member who was murdered. And it literally, and then like my dad is a gang member. And so my life should have been like different. My life path should have been different. But it took me going to Atlanta, being in a different environment where I saw Black people thriving and having Black businesses and seeing Black opulence and seeing Black people actually work together, regardless if you're dark skin, light skin, hair texture, you know, facial features. Like nobody cared about that. Like they all worked together. They helped each other. I learned how to network out there. Like it's a different environment versus like your hometown. Like, and I'm sure people who live in DC, so I'm in DC now, and our communities, our Ward 7, Ward 8 is plagued by violence, and every day you're seeing another shooting. And when I'm working with that population, I understand the reason why they can't change the way that we want them so fast, because they're coming from a line of like mass incarceration, the war on drugs, the whole splitting up families during welfare. Like we are literally looking at now in 2020 the residual effects of everything that happened 40 plus years ago. You know, I mean, if we think about it, like the Black Panther had an agenda that basically is relevant for today. That agenda speaks to what we really truly need now. But we've had so much trauma. We've been under attack so much from this system that it is hard for us to get out. Even if we think about like poverty and homelessness, a lot of people don't understand that. Like, yeah, great grandma might have had a house in the community for a long time, but she might not have really owned that home. The land, once she died, the landlord said, "Oh no, I'm taking this back," and that's how a lot of families, especially men, became homeless. We even have to think about our habits and how we raise our children. I know that, like, you know, there's a lot of talk about mothers who cater to their Black sons versus like their Black daughters. And so like we just have to be mindful of all of these themes that are played in our Black community and understand like why it's holding us back. I was very conscious about, I am going to date me a dark skinned man to have me dark skinned babies so I can pour into them confidence and self-esteem and raise them to be beautiful Black children to go out and be courageous in this world. But you have to be like conscious about that, because if not, you're going to be brainwashed and say, well, dark skin is not great, so I want to have a mixed baby, curly, like, you know, because this is what society has told us for so long. They even said like you had to marry someone light. I mean, we think about in the entertainment industry, it was like you had to have like a lighter wife in order to have some clout and some space in the elitist world. So I just think we have to be mindful of all of like the isms that have been brought onto us and all of and it has so much intersectionality. So yeah, it's a lot of barriers. I mean, it's tough, but I think that we can definitely do it. I think that it's just about like people like you, like educators, not giving up. I know that I meet like, you know, some of my peers who have been doing this work longer than me, and they're like, we've been doing it so long, like we've seen the patterns over and over, it's not getting better, but I feel like we just can't give up on changing our communities, even if it's one person at a time.
I hear, but we I'm telling you, if we don't wake up, it's a wrap. I'm just saying, because it is not, it is great for the few,
yep,
but for the masses, it is not, you know, getting better. And part of that, in my opinion, it stems from a lot of things, and things that honestly, if you were to speak about them, that you'd have some of our own people come out and say, oh, you're talking this white conservative stuff, you're talking this. But for me, if you say, to me, there's nothing controversial about saying get married. have children, build a certain type of family, build an economic power base. I don't know why that would be controversial to people to say that, because again, this is old school stuff. Like, I'm 46. So for me, if when I say that, that's my grandma right there. I'm not talking, I don't know, again, what's controversial about that. And when you, again, say you are a person of faith, I don't know any book that says go out there and do the WAP or what, you understand what I'm saying? I mean, I'm just saying, like, there are certain, like, when you talk about the mental health and all those things, I get how all of this is connected, but I see what's going on, and I'm like, we got work to do. You know what I'm saying? And as I mentioned earlier, I'm angered, but I'm concerned and I'm confused, because the roadmap is there, and we've had other people who look like us who have told us this is the roadmap.
Well, I will say this. I agree with that, but I also think we got to be mindful about, like, what has religion also taught us, right? It also taught us that they controlled us with that in slavery. And some people say, like, that's not our original religion. And so you have, but it's all a divide and conquer, right? And so you have all of these divisives that you can be Muslim, you can be this. For me, I'm gonna be honest with you. I am a person that is like, all of those entities are just vehicles to get to the same God. We are all, you might can have your own way, your own path of getting there, but we're all talking to the same universe, the same God. And that's just what it is. But when you look at all of the nuances and everything else, then yes, you are going to be confused and not know what to do. When you talked about marriage and the benefits of it, marriage was a business, right? But because we've been taught to, like, not even have a family, most of us don't come from two-parent homes, or had families who were married for for years, for decades. A lot of us don't have that, but also a lot of us don't even have grandparents. I tell people a lot that, like, we don't have grandparents in the neighborhoods no more. Back in the day, there was your older individuals on the block who can police everybody up. You knew that one lady will probably go tell your mom, do that, and it was okay. Now I think our parents got younger, and I'm not saying anything about young moms, because I was raised by a mother who had me at 20 years old. So I definitely think, like, it's doable and there's exceptions to the rule, but, like, we have to go back to that collective, that community. If we don't start policing each other up, then there's no way that we can be on one accord. And I think that is kind of what our grandparents did for us. You knew that you were not going to disrespect, like, that older woman that was on the block because everybody valued her, or the older man that was on the block because everyone valued that person. He was like a father figure, mother figure to the whole community. And then you also had it back then where we took care of one another. I remember, like, I could go to my cousin's house and they can watch me. This generation, they don't have the collectivism in their communities. Like, the grandmother is not watching the children because she possibly is out as well. So yeah, I just think that it's the dynamics. It's a lot of dynamics that go into play with the, like, family systems and the structure of the family system that we have to be mindful of. And I think if all of us are just very, very transparent with sharing our stories, we can honestly change the narrative. And that is what trauma is all about, is like changing the narrative so your brain can start operating differently.
So I want to ask you this, because you've mentioned, several times about the need for individuals to seek out therapy.
Mm-hmm.
How does someone, do that? I know there's Google out there, but I don't know if it's even wise to sort of Google therapists in your city to find you one. So how does someone sort of go about finding a therapist? And when you're talking about someone, if you're talking about, okay, Black people or another group that may have had a history of oppression and dealing with systematic racism, etc., is it best for that group to seek out a therapist who is from that group, who may bring a different cultural understanding to that process?
So I'm going to say yes, but I'm also going to say all therapists should be culturally competent. That is a part of our ethics. So we have to seek out learning about other cultures, and understanding like how they process things and how their habits and behaviors are. So I would say you can go to any therapist. I tell people to treat therapy like you're dating, and hopefully you have great dating habits. Because you should go out. I mean, like, you don't have to commit to a therapist. You can go do a consultation with 50 therapists in 1 month, and you can pick your choice, whichever one, sticks with you or you get a good vibe from. But you can find therapists there's a lot of platforms. I know a lot of us are using like social media and really kind of putting ourselves out there in marketing. But you have like therapy for Black girls, therapy for Black men. You have platforms like, I'm trying to think of the name. It's like Ayana, who actually uses it to find, to do therapy for all like marginalized BIPOC, is that what they're calling it now? And so then you have like clinicians of color. You have, so you just have so many, like, I mean, you have Psychology Today, which is having some issues when it comes to like racism and things like that. But a lot of our therapists use that platform in Psychology Today. But you can just always just reach out to anyone. You can DM someone on Instagram or Twitter or whatever to find a therapist. And I will say, just ask questions. You might want to, Google and research modalities and different like interventions of therapy, because maybe you think that cognitive behavior therapy works better for you than psychodynamic. But you definitely want to understand like that therapist and what they believe in and what they use before you work with them. And during a consultation, all consultations, we have to do like at least a 15-minute free consultation to get to know the client. So yeah, that's why I say you can do 50 of them if you wanted to in a day to find a therapist. But to be honest, I really think we have to just talk about therapy is literally just talking to like your best friend, somebody who's going to help you process that information and give you tools to go out and to have in your toolkit to navigate through this life. But you also want to make sure that that therapist is comfortable with what you bring to the table. Some therapists are not like qualified to work with those who could have committed like sexual abuse or something like that. Like some therapists can't work with individuals like that. So just want to be mindful and ask as many questions as possible.
That's all right. That's all right. People, I know we kind of jumped the shark a little bit toward the end of this conversation, but I've definitely thoroughly enjoyed it and found it to be, relevant to where I think this conversation in terms of our background and our familial relationships and how that all affects, where we are. I know for me, I spent the sort of earlier parts of my life post my parents' divorce with hardly anything. Mm-hmm. And even though when my brother and I moved with Pops, who had a middle-class job. So at that point, worrying about the lights or food or clothes or whatever, that was no longer part of our reality. Mm-hmm. It was still here. Yeah. And so for me, money is about security. And that's why I stack my coin you know, I, my wife will tell you that I'm just flat out cheap, but you know, I do some stuff, you know, but I don't get extravagant with it. I try to make wise choices, but I try to stack money and stack and stack and stack and stack. Because for me, security drives me. I don't ever want to be in a situation where I need to write a $2,000 check. I don't want to write the $2,000 check, but I don't want to have to write it and be like, where am I going to get that money from? Yeah. I want to be able to go, what's going to hurt? But just write it and walk away and be okay with it. And then also know that I got more sitting there where that 2,000 is not going to put me in a bind for the next situation. So that's how I live my life financially in terms of security is everything for me. And
but that's a good, really quick, that's a good point, right? So you say security, but think about a lot of people who don't even know what security means. So that plays into their financial decisions because they don't know what security means. They don't know that, like, all they know, they're operating from a place of a lack. So when you're in like survivor mode, you're operating at like, I need to do this because I never had. Your back is against the wall, right? And most of us operate that way because that's all we know. It's hard to transition to that, operating from a place of like safety, security, thriving, because your body is more calm. Your nervous system is not like on pins and needles all day. We're operating from lack. You're just always anxious. And so that's kind of that. I mean, and for any therapist should know, talk about like security, finances, anything like that. Because if you think about the Maslow's hierarchy, it says shelter, food, and water is like the main thing. And I like to add love and access to internet on that first level. Because we're going to need that in order for you to move up and have some self-actualization.
Yeah. But things for me were different because I went to school, right? And I got some letters. Now, it doesn't make me special, but it does mean it affords me, again, greater opportunities in my career to where I can make money, to where I am not stressed out about, am I going to be able to pay my bills? You know what I'm saying?
But you were smart, and I agree with you. I love education. But there's this narrative in the Black community that says education is a scam, right? And that we pay all this money to get in debt, and then we don't have nice jobs. I hear that, but then I also see, I love to like, I actually watched a podcast with 19 Keys and like Earn Your Leisure in them. And I love the way that he talks about education, because if we think about education about getting a trade, and like I'm a therapist, right? And so I have a license, and I'm also working on my Ph.D. But I have a license, so where I can go off and become an entrepreneur, start my own business. And hell, if I don't make it, if I fall, I can still go back and get a job because I still have that education. I still have this experience to back me up, to make me more marketable. If we think about like education and everything around us as a business, whether it's marriage, whatever you're doing, if you think about it as a business and making sure it's like transactional and beneficial, I think that we get more out of life when we think about it that way. Because I'm the same way. I'm very frugal. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of money. I love to make sure I have a good savings, but I also love to invest. So I think of luxury. There's this big thing about luxury on Twitter right now, about women in luxury, right? I don't look at luxury as like purses and clothes I wear. That's just not me. I'm looking at luxury as, how much do I have in the stock market? How much do I have invest? How much do I have in land and properties? I want to know like how well my businesses are doing. How much am I investing into myself to continue to like educate and sharpen my tools? Like for me, that is luxury. To know that I can afford those type of items, that is luxury. I mean, yes, I love to get like the spa and stuff like that, but I'm not going to I'm not spending $1,000, $3,000 on a bag that I have to carry. Like it just doesn't make sense to me. Especially when we have so much, like you can create a will, like, you know, you want to do some estate planning and like have a financial advisor and, you know, make sure you have a good budget. I really like, when I started investing into the stock market, it offered me security. So I understood like, oh, I can pull out money if I needed to, I can add money. So like I've been investing for 10 years and I started at like $500 and now it's grown so much that I'm like, oh, I will continue this. Like I'm not going to stop investing. So I would never pause it and buy like a bag or something. For me, I just think that is, it doesn't make sense, especially when we know a lot of these clothing designers and all of that, they don't even like us. They're racist themselves. So it just doesn't make sense to spend money where it's not going to get a return in your investment.
Hey, I think of money differently. So this has been awesome. So I just want to ask you before we go, what has been your greatest life lesson that you've learned about money?
Oh, your money can work for you. Make your money work for you. Honestly, passive income, that's been the best thing that I've learned. It's like assets and liabilities. I stand by it. I am really big on it. But you can always let your money work for you. I used to work in the music industry back when I was in 2009. And that's when I bought my first BlackBerry. And that's when people were really making money from their phone. So this whole new making money from your phone and pushing out content, people were doing that back then. The stock market never sleeps. I mean, well, it closes, you know, but like it never sleeps. You can always make money from it. So yeah, like your money can work for you.
That's all right. That's all right. Now, people, thank you, Christian, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Will.
You're welcome. Now, people, you know how I do this. This podcast episode will be going on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Simplecast, Stitcher, and Spotify. I need you to subscribe, leave your comments. I like the stars, people, but can a brother get some ratings? Because I'm trying to get Oprah on the show. Look, I get Oprah, it's over. I'm just gonna tell the work job.
Next best thing right here.
Right. Hey, you doing it? You doing it? I just love. Well, you know, Oprah's from Mississippi, like I am, and I love how she owned her stuff, right? And she owned herself. And even when she says, you know, like stars have been on her show who kind of blew up or about to blow up, and she said, "Let me tell you something now. You sign every check. Don't, just because you getting all this money now, don't let other people control your money. You sign every check." And I'm like, and when I look at that, and then the whole ownership piece, because we don't own a lot of stuff. We rep stuff. We get paid to do stuff, but we don't own stuff, you know. And even when, when Puff was like, yo, I got Revolt TV, and he's getting into all this thing with Comcast. And I'm thinking, why isn't Revolt a streaming app that you can just put on the Roku or Fire Stick and just charge people, bypass the cable company, go straight to the Black community or other consumers and own what you own? I'm like, come on, Puff. I mean, you know.
Well, we know that some people like to sell themselves. Sell themselves short, you know, but yeah.
Let's make this money, brother. Let's make this money.
Work smarter, not harder.
No doubt. That's what I love about this internet, is how the gatekeepers are done. They're done. I put out a documentary a year ago, and now it's on Amazon Prime. It is on Vimeo, but I didn't go to anybody to be like, Warner Brothers or whatever, you know, let's get this thing together. Now, I did sign with a publisher to get this thing done, but we went straight to the folks where people can stream it.
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, I believe in ownership. I believe in, you know, not having to sort of ask permission to shine when you can do it yourself, you know.
And Dame Dash been pushing that since back in the day. Ownership.
Yes, yes, people. Let me go ahead and close this out, people. Okay,
Keep
people.
going.
Woo, people. Hey, I like
Thank
to thank my guest, right? Christian Howard, for coming on and dropping so many gems and having such a great conversation on the show. I'd like to thank you again for checking out another episode of the Dr. Will Show, the mobile university for entrepreneurs, and sticking around with me for 6 years. As always, people, invest in you. EDU. Peace.